Hello, everybody. Welcome to Insane College Football. We're going to try to hit the record projections for most of the major programs in college football before the season starts. Starting with the North Carolina Tar Heels. I've used a random selection process to select the order which I'm doing each of these teams, and North Carolina got selected first. So, the way that we do this is we take a look at your schedule because team quality really is only half the story when it comes to what a team's record is going to be. It also matters the schedule you play, and your opponents do have quite a bit to do with your performance on the field and how good they are. So, what we do is predicting where the wins and losses happen isn't as important as predicting how likely a team is to win some of the games, because sometimes you will win some unlikely games to win, but then to compensate, you will lose games that you are more likely to win. So what I've done is essentially graded each game on a scale from 0 to 1, rounding to the nearest 0.25. So you have a 5 rating scale of 0, which means we think you are very likely to not win this game, or very close to having no chance at winning the game. And then we have all the way to 1, which is it is almost certain that you win the game. It would be a statistical anomaly for you to not win this game. So, with that said, there are 4 games rated a 1 on the North Carolina schedule. And that is Florida A&M. If you lose this game, we could be talking, this team's not making a bowl, which I don't see. Last year North Carolina had a 6-7 record. They lost to South Carolina in the bowl game. They had some problems, very bad on the road last year, and I think that affected this team to the point that even though they lose Sam Howell, I actually think the high expectations were really too much for them. After the good 2020 season they had, everyone was expecting them to take a step forward, and sometimes you don't always do that. And so I think that with this team, with the recruiting and the trajectory that Mac Brown has this team on, I actually think that this could be the year they actually surprise people. So, Florida A&M's obviously a 1. I'm going to say App State is a 1. You could argue that it would be a 1, and I'm not so sure that, I mean, this is a losable game. I believe Mac Brown's first year they lost to App State. So it's definitely possible that they could lose this game, especially on the road. But I don't see that happening, and I think that this team is good enough where even on the road against group of 5 teams, you should handle them. Georgia State is another one. Georgia State has been known to have really good games against Power 5 teams. They play up to that level very well. They beat Tennessee a few years ago, and they almost beat Auburn last year. So that game's a 1. And at Duke, for a road conference game, it is very unlikely that you will have any 1s, but I'm not very high on Duke. I don't see them doing very well in the ACC conference. They are one of the worst teams in the conference, if not the worst. So I do think a team of North Carolina's talent level should be able to handle Duke. Again, that's not saying that it's a 100% certainty, but it's saying it's close enough where you can count it that way. Now we go game by game. The last out-of-conference game for North Carolina is Notre Dame. Notre Dame, I've rated a 0.5, meaning this game could go either way. This is probably a one-possession game in the fourth quarter. Maybe if it's not, it's one of these teams puts on a touchdown late to go up by 13 or whatever. I think that, Notre Dame is going to feel the aftershock of Brian Kelly leaving, and there will be some growing pains. I know a lot of Notre Dame fans seem happy and they're glad Brian Kelly's gone. But I do think the schedule sets up this year where, Notre Dame might struggle in a few games. This might be one of them. So I give North Carolina a 0.5 difficulty for this game. Virginia Tech, 0.75 for North Carolina. I think that they should be able to handle Virginia Tech, but at the same time, Virginia Tech is talented enough they can hold their own, but I do think it's more likely than not likely that North Carolina wins this game. Brent Pry has come in as the new coach. I expect him to do well, but with a new coach and the roster problems that Virginia Tech is having, I don't expect them to do much in year one under Brent Pry. At Miami is a 0.5. Mario Cristobal is doing a lot in recruiting right now. He arguably did a lot on signing day to help bring the Miami class from last year up to what it is now. And so I do think there's talent on this team, and especially on the road for North Carolina. I think that these two teams comparable in terms of talent level, and I think this should be not an easy game for either team to win. I believe North Carolina won by 10 last year. You're not going to see what you saw in 2020 where they beat them like 62-26 or whatever, put up a ton of rushing yards in that game. I don't think you'll see a blowout like that. It's going to be a close game. Pitt. North Carolina goes from a bye to playing Pitt at home. This was an overtime game last year in the rain. And I remember watching that last sequence, and it was kind of painful to watch, honestly, between these two teams. I have this as a 0.5 as well for North Carolina. I think that this game could go either way. North Carolina fans probably expect to beat Pitt, especially after how disappointing the result was last year. Although it was late in the season, you knew probably the season was kind of over in terms of being able to win the division. But I do think that North Carolina and Pitt will be a tough game for either team to win. I don't expect a blowout, and I could see that game going either way. At Virginia, even on the road, I do think that this is a 0.75 for North Carolina. You have Tony Elliott coming in at head coach. This game, last year, I believe North Carolina put up 59 points. It was one of their better offensive games last year. I look at this and I say, Bronco Mendenhall, last year they started out really well, just fizzled out towards the end of the year, kind of like Auburn. And honestly, if you think about it, Bronco Mendenhall was kind of the Brian Harsin of the ACC anyway. I don't see this roster being very comparable to North Carolina's roster, and I think North Carolina has the definitively better roster. Even on the road, I think that North Carolina is more likely to win this game and more likely to put up some margin in this game. At Wake, these games the last couple of years against North Carolina and Wake have been absolute shootouts. Do we have any reason to suspect that this game will be any different? I don't know. But I do know that Wake tends to play above the talent level that they have. They've proven that they can win games even when they're not favored. And, Wake was really good last year and made it to the ACC championship game. I expect this to be a 50-50 game. I have this as a 0.5 for Wake and for North Carolina as well. Georgia Tech. Do we expect any improvement from Jeff Collins' Georgia Tech this year? I happen to think that they will be able to put up a fight. People forget Georgia Tech blew out North Carolina last year. So, even when outmatched in terms of talent, Jeff Collins' teams have the ability to play up to the level of their competition. Now, obviously, they tend to lose a lot of close games, but will Georgia Tech make it to bowl eligibility? I don't know, but I highly doubt that they're just going to lay down and submit against North Carolina. So I have this as a 0.5. Was very close to putting it at 0.75, but I do think this could be a competitive game. NC State, it's a team a lot of people are high on. Some people even have them making the playoff this year. I'm not that high on NC State, but I do think they're going to be good this year. And so I have this as a 0.5 because I believe they're playing a team with a very similar talent level. Both great coaches. This game was an absolute thriller last year. North Carolina thought they had the game won, and then NC State comes back and wins the game at the end in very clutch fashion. So I do think that NC State and North Carolina has the ability to be a competitive game. So when you add up all the decimal points and all the numbers, it rounds to 9-3 for this team. That is my record prediction. If this doesn't happen, I do think Mac Brown, he might not retire, he might not get fired, but that will be the beginning of the end. He might stay a couple more years, but I think that this is the team that Mac Brown has all of his chips in on whether he's going to stay long term, and the result of this team will ultimately go a long way in deciding that. I happen to think that this team and this coach and this staff have the ability to do that, but as we've seen, it's a wait and see kind of thing. The recruiting is definitely in an upward trend. Obviously, the record hasn't been, and North Carolina fans have a right to be disappointed in that. But I do think this team will win 9 games in the regular season based on the difficulties of each of the games that I have just mentioned. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.